hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. When we discuss reggae in all its brilliance, beauty and splendor, we always celebrate the great artists and their music and easily overlook the producers who sit on top of the recording process, tweaking and fine-tuning the sound, making sure that the artist's vision emerges as a gorgeous finished product that will be appreciated for centuries to come. Like other genres, reggae music has witnessed the emergence of some magnificent producers since its inception. These geniuses and innovators cultivated the creative atmosphere and expertly crafted music in tandem with the prevailing trends in society, resulting in critical and commercial success. We are counting down our picks for the greatest reggae producers of all time, the ones that put reggae on the map as one of the superpowers in world music. Number 6. Leslie Kong. Leslie Kong is one of the most unique in this list. He's since been celebrated as the first Jamaican record producer to craft international hit songs and prove that the island had the talent to compete on the world stage. He came from a middle-class family and ran the family restaurant and ice cream parlor named Beverly's. His entrance into the music business began in 1961 with a visit from a teenage Jimmy Cliff who had just moved to the city from his village looking for opportunities in the music business. Jimmy Cliff offered to write a song for the restaurant for a fee. Seeing the potential in the music business, Kong launched his own label, also called Beverly's, with Jimmy Cliff as his first artist. Cliff later brought a young Bob Marley to the office to meet with Kong, and Kong produced his first single titled One Cup of Coffee in 1962. Kong would also go on to produce groundbreaking tunes for the likes of Peter Tosh and John Holt, before producing Desmond Dekker, whose songs like The Israelites and 007 became among the first Jamaican produced songs to break into the international charts. The song Israelites in particular flew to number 1 in the UK, West Germany and the Netherlands, and top 10 in 12 other countries. In the same period, Leslie Kong also began to produce Toots and the Maytals and crafted timeless hits like 5446, Do the Reggae, which gave the genre its name, and Monkey Man, which also broke into the UK charts, as well as songs like Rivers of Babylon by the Melodians, and countless others which charted internationally. In between 1967 and 1970, any reggae record that became a worldwide hit was most likely the handiwork of Leslie Kong. But just as it seemed that he was set to rule the 1970s, he died suddenly of a heart attack in 1971 at the age of 39. Number 5. Joe Gibbs. This musical giant was born in Montego Bay in 1942. As a young man, he went to work at a US naval base in Guantanamo, Cuba as an electronics technician. He returned to Jamaica in the mid-1960s. Armed with the skills he had acquired in Cuba, opened a television and radio repair shop. Seeing the booming music business on the island, he also began to sell records out of his store. His interest in the music escalated, and coupled with his background as an electronic technician, he began to get interested in the production end of the music business and began to work with popular rocksteady producer Ken Lack. After a while, he had acquired enough expertise to attempt producing by himself. He set up a small 2-track studio in the back of his repair shop, and by 1967, he had launched his own record label named Amalgamated. The same year, he produced the song Hold Them for singer Roy Shirley. It was one of the first rocksteady songs ever produced and flew up to number 1 of the Jamaican charts. This gave his profile a huge boost, and he would enter into a collaboration with Lee Scratch Perry, who had just fallen out with Coxon Dodd and left Studio One. Lee Scratch Perry left Joe Gibbs' studio not long after, and ace sound engineer Errol Thompson joined forces with Gibbs. Their collaboration became legendary, and they became known as the Mighty Two, and together they produced hundreds of smash hits and countless classics for the likes of Peter Tosh, Delroy Wilson, the Heptones, Gregory Isaacs, Jacob Miller, and many more. Some of their best known material included Dennis Brown's smash hits Money in My Pocket and Culture's debut album 2 Sevens Clash. Number 4. King Tubby. This legend was born Osborne Ruddock and came into popularity as a sound engineer who pioneered dub as a subgenre of reggae. His innovations and groundbreaking techniques laid the foundations for modern dance music when he invented the concept of the remix, which has formed the bedrock of dance and electronic music as we know it today. Just like Joe Gibbs, King Tubby started out as a wizard of an electronic technician. He was a radio repairman and later graduated to building amplifiers for the local sound systems. After building his own transmitter, he began to run his own pirate radio station, but was forced to shut it down when the Jamaican police staged a manhunt looking to catch the perpetrators. So he shut it down and formed a sound system that was called Tubby's Hometown Hi-Fi. This sound system began to make use of echoes and reverbs, sound effects perfect for a rising DJ in his outfit called U-Roy. While working as a disc cutter for Duke Reid's Treasure Isle record label in 1968, he created dub, creating new music out from instrumentals by adding special effects like echoes, reverbs, and delays, and it proved to be amazingly popular. By the 1970s, he was providing dub remixes for producers like Lee Scratch Perry and Glenn Brown, and began to produce top artists like Johnny Clark, Augustus Pablo, and Lynbal Thompson, as well as so many other artists who caught on to the dub craze. By the late 1970s, he had entered into semi-retirement and had built a new studio by the early 1980s, mentoring a new generation of producers like one Lloyd James, aka King Jammy, and Hopton Brown, aka Scientist. King Tubby was murdered in 1989 outside his home in a senseless act of violence. Number 3. King Jammy. He began his musical career as a sound system operator, and after a period working in America, he returned to Jamaica and became an apprentice to King Tubby in the mid-1970s. He began to release his own productions by the end of the decade, including the debut album for the original Black Uhuru lineup in 1977. But for all his great early work, he established himself as one of the greatest producers from Jamaica when he crafted the first digital dancehall beat for singer Wayne Smith in 1985 with the track Under Miss Lengteng. This opened up a new era for dancehall, and a new generation of dancehall artists became superstars via songs produced by King Jammy in the 1980s. These included the likes of Admiral Bailey, Admiral Tibet, Shaka Demus, and Frankie Paul. Number 2. Lee Scratch Perry. This eccentric icon was one of the pivotal figures of reggae from the late 1960s down into the late 1970s and stayed relevant into the 2000s. He started out as an employee of Studio One, selling records at Coxon Dodd's record store, and after a while began to record tracks for Studio One's record label. After a few years, he fell out with Coxon Dodd over financial issues and joined Joe Gibbs at his studio. He also fell out with Joe Gibbs and formed his own label, Upsetter Records, in 1968. He produced the Wailers' Soul Rebel album in 1970 and was noted to have helped the trio develop a more funky and badass style that would become their trademark. Perry had for years been a mobile producer, using different studios across Kingston to record his music. But in 1973, he built his own studio in the back of his parents' home in Kingston, and this studio became known as the legendary Black Ark Studios. It became the birthplace of some of reggae's greatest albums, like Max Romeo's War in a Babylon, Junior Murvin's Police and Thieves, and the Heptones' Party Time. A very eccentric personality, he worked tirelessly for years, up until 1978, when high levels of stress and undesirable influences began to take their toll. Black Ark Studios fell into shabbiness and disrepair, and eventually it was burned to the ground. He went on to an erratic career up until his death in 2021. And coming in at number 1 is Clement Coxon Dodd. The Don of Studio One was a towering figure with an unrivaled role in the development of reggae in its evolution from ska to dancehall. He was popularly referred to as the Berry Gordy of Jamaica, and Studio One was his own Motown. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the Jamaican music industry was built around the templates that Coxon Dodd set up. The vast amount of music recorded for his label and in his studios has been sampled by thousands and thousands of artists over the years and is still being used today. He was born in 1932 in Kingston, Jamaica, and moved to the US after finishing school. He returned to Jamaica in 1954 and established his sound system called Coxon Downbeats. He established his Studio One label not long after and began to produce music that would supply his sound system with sounds that people could dance to. By 1963, he had set up the first black-owned recording studio in Jamaica, which became known as Studio One. With an elite in-house band called the Scatterlights, the outfit turned out some of the biggest names of that era, from the likes of Delroy Wilson, Toots and the Maytals, and the Wailers, and not to mention discovering a young Dennis Brown. regularly sprouting new talent into the 1970s, like Burning Spear, Freddie McGregor, Dennis Al Capone, and Horace Andy. Even into the 1980s, when dancehall had all but taken over, Studio One still had a robust lineup with the likes of Sugar Minott, Johnny Osborne, and Frankie Paul. And by the end of the 80s, political unrest in Jamaica saw him move his operations to New York, where he established a studio and a record store in Brooklyn. He died in 2004 of a heart attack, just 4 days after the road that was home to his recording studio had been renamed Studio One Boulevard by the Jamaican government. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.